I do have this word in my presentation called marketing, and here at SUGCON, maybe that's not the the word that's like the big attention getter when the audience is mostly technical. But I think it was really great to hear Lars Nielsen say that you are the the real marketers are the developers working in Sitecore, and I really do see the sense in that. So I like to talk, and I'll probably talk too much, and I don't want to sort of end up like not getting to all the material, so I just want to jump into it, and I'll tell a little bit about myself underway. So to infinity and beyond, right from the beginning of the day with a keynote from Lars Nielsen, some really exciting, cool stuff on the horizon with Sitecore. And then we see robots. I've just been to a couple of presentations about Sitecore and cognitive learning and machine learning and so forth. So there's like tons of cool stuff to learn here at SUGCON. However, that's not what you're going to get from me here today, because in my role in Sitecore, I get the opportunity to work in the field, together with customers and partners, actually, planning, designing, implementing, optimizing customer experiences using Sitecore capabilities that you know today. And what I want to do today is basically share a lot of the experience of those who I've had the opportunity to work with. So I think this is a really nice quote. It's not so much learning from your own experience, but from the experience of those who you've also learned from. And that's what I always try to do whenever I get the opportunity to talk about how others can learn from Sitecore. So one of the key things, so I don't see anyone walking out, so that's great. So one of the key things that I've learned is that, and this is, I'm just putting this here in the beginning before I get to my 5 keys to the successful context marketing project, is there's this phenomenon. I think we all recognize it because we're sort of like leading edge digital people, technology people, but we're ahead of the curve in terms of where most of the world is, and that includes organizations that use like technologies like Sitecore and similar. And there's this phenomenon, I call it like give to get. So I think you recognize, and it's almost like subconscious now. I mean, we use Google when we have questions, and we do that because we get results back. We use social networking, we use Facebook, we use other e-commerce. We have a need for various types of needs. So we're willing to ask questions, we're willing to share data because we get value from it. And one of the most important things that I'm always advising customers about is that take that phenomenon and build it into your own customer experiences. Build that idea of interaction for value. Have your customers interact so that they get value. And that's a phenomenon that, this is what we're being conditioned to the way we're being conditioned to think. So the reality is that there's this sort of evolution of engagement, from analog engagement, isolated engagement, to early days of digital, where it's about passive engagement. And I think a lot of the world is kind of stuck in the idea of passive engagement, the way that we sort of measure the quality of experiences. And more and more, as I talk about give to get, it's about interactions. It's about active engagement. And active engagement is something Sitecore, I think, has been quite smart in tapping into, the idea of measuring the quality of experiences based on users actually taking action. So action equals engagement, and if you combine that with give to get, it actually makes a lot of sense to sort of really begin to think in this direction with regard to customer experience and with regard to leveraging technology. So I'm going to talk a lot more about this. Of course, as engagement gets more interactive, there's a lot more data generated. So, and we're hearing about Internet of Things a lot, and of course, this is the direction things are going to be going in. So, so context marketing, a definition of context marketing. I know that Sitecore started coming out talking about experience marketing, and then sort of like shifted using this term context marketing. And I think that I highly encourage, when I have the opportunity to work with customers, don't sort of treat this as a marketing term. It's really, it's a holistic approach to how a business can think about, doing what it does. So this definition of context marketing that I've recently sort of upgraded because I realized that we can make it more effective. But the real keys to it is basically, you know, detecting intent in real time and being able to, you know, process that information. And you know, I use the word calculate, but this idea that you can actually, that systematically a machine can sort of, you know, calculate what the intent of a customer might be, and then respond accordingly. So this core idea of, you know, using data, and what's really differentiating here about context marketing is it's in moments of decision. So the rapid access to customer experience data is just the real core of what this is about. And when you consider that a lot of the world is based on siloed data, where the immediate rapid access to, you know, customer experience data is not possible, it really makes a lot of, that would help if I put it up. It really makes a lot of sense to sort of embrace this idea of context marketing. Beyond this, there's the idea of it's about the data and content. So there's, as we all know, on any given, you know, digital visit, you know, you might be ready to make a decision that you've been contemplating. You know, maybe you've been researching it. Maybe it's the first visit, maybe it's the fifth visit. But the way that we sort of behave as you know, connected consumers and digital, you know, animals, is that it's about the journey. It's about recognizing when a person is sort of, you know, what their need is. And the closer we get to making a decision, the more revealing data is about that. And you want to be able to tap into that, you know, in moments of decision. So that's a little bit about, I think it's important to sort of establish, you know, what is context marketing. It's more than a marketing, in my view, it's more than sort of like a marketing phrase. It's actually a kind of a philosophy and an overall approach. And then this idea, I heard this recently, and I just think it's so good, it's so relevant. This idea that you know, each time a customer is exposed to an improved shopping experience, their shopping expectations are reset to a new higher level. I think we can all recognize this. You know, we sort of measure all of the experiences that we have against the best experiences that we've had and the worst experiences that we've had. So this idea of, are your customers setting the bar, or are you setting the bar? And I think that this, for me, really sums it up. I can present a lot of research about how visitors or, you know, consumers are receptive to personalization and more demanding about it. But I think we understand a lot from this one. So my 5 keys to success, the how. I want to sort of go through these, and definitely want to leave time if there's any questions. You know, feel free to keep them to be ready with questions. So the first key to success, and again, this is based on, you know, the learnings that I have as an SBOSS consultant, a strategic, you know, business optimization consultant, where in Sitecore we, you know, fortunate to have lots of great customers and access to lots of brands that are maybe not necessarily that easy to get into, you know, depending on the type of company. So we get a lot of the opportunity to work with lots of different types of organizations, and I get to participate in projects with, you know, banks, airlines, insurance companies, B2B organizations, primarily in Europe. I live in Europe. I'm from the US, there's really a lot to learn, and that's really what I want to share. So the first one, this idea of rethinking your customer's experience, and so there's a famous quote here. You know, someone famous once said, if you want to leverage the quality of customer experience as a strategic driver, you need to make sure you actually provide a genuinely meaningful experience. It's not uncommon that I or one of my colleagues, or maybe a lot of you would recognize this, is that a given customer just thinks, well, we have the way that we currently provide customer experiences, the way we currently conduct business, let's just use personalization. Let's just add technology. Let's just add these, like, you know, machine learning and so forth. And what the reality is that if you don't actually provide a customer experience, then you really can't optimize it. So this idea, and I'm often having this conversation initially, a lot of organizations, a lot of brands, companies, you know, it's a product experience. It's about look at my products and decide which one you want to buy. and we'll optimize the, the checkout funnel and these kind of things. But you really need to take a step back and think about, if we want to create better customer experiences, we need to have a baseline customer experience to begin with. So, quite an essential thing, and it's part of this initial awareness. So, I've sort of run into this numerous times, and I thought about, well, how could I make an example of this? And then it occurred to me that I have a good example in my pocket, so to speak. So I'm from the US. I live in Denmark. I've lived in Denmark for many years. And it just so happens that I have a bank account in the US and I have a bank account in Denmark. And for me, when I thought about, where do I see this idea of companies that have taken a step back and sort of rethought the way they provide customer experiences, I thought this is actually quite a good example. So if we look on the home pages and we look at the sort of, what's the message of impact on the home page? You come into the front door and you're welcome. And it's this one. And the difference between these two is that on the left, this is about the bank. On the right, this is about the customer. This is about me. This is about me. And this is a Google Translate. It's a Danish bank. And so it's not the smoothest translation, but life is about more than money. That's something that I can relate to as an individual. And Wells Fargo, this is like, this is what we're doing. It's about the bank. So you can really see, for me, it really resonated, this idea of being brand-centric versus customer-centric. And on projects where I've had the opportunity to work with a customer, through the process of adopting context marketing, working with personalization, measuring, optimizing, then you really see that they begin to understand this idea of being customer-centric rather than brand-centric. So there's a lot to learn by actually doing it. So the bank, the Danish bank that I work with, just to give a little flavor of how they've rethought the customer experience, there's a lot of, this is a bank, it's a conservative large bank, but there's a lot of content that is of a utility value for me as a customer. For example, in the different points in your life when you have to make different decisions, when your child moves away from home, there's lots of articles that are of a sort of utilitarian value, like what to think about your child's economy, what to think about the extra space, so forth and so on. So there's just a lot of like genuinely valuable content. Now, I talked a lot before about context and data is the key. So obviously, if I'm looking at this type of content, I'm segmenting myself, I'm identifying my need, I'm identifying what my considerations are, what my emotional considerations might be. And this is extremely valuable if you want to provide a better customer experience and present the most relevant products for me at the right time. So it starts with a customer, it doesn't start with a product. So I thought that this was a good example. Another example is a website where I buy groceries, or in our family, we buy groceries. So obviously you can see the types of products here. It's a commodity situation. Like there's lots of places that you can go and buy these types of products. I can go down the street, or I can go online. And so what they need to do is they need to think about how can we make a more contextual experience where we become more than a commodity. We're of more value than just providing simple pricing and product selection. So one of the things that they've done is that they have this recipe section on the website where you can browse through lots of recipe by category. So in one contextual situation, it might be that it's a Saturday morning. We're having company for Saturday evening. We want to make a nice meal, a little bit fancy, have a nice dessert. In another situation, it might be it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We want to make a quick dinner. Everyone's hungry. We know that this is the way our work week goes. What do we do? So there's this idea that you can choose different types of menus for different types of situations. It reveals something about what your psychological, your psychographic, to some degree, your demographic characteristics might be. And it provides convenience. So this idea of context marketing providing convenience is super, super important. And very often, it's kind of utility information. It's utility types of services, interactions, online tools like this one. So for example, if I choose a recipe, then I get to know all the ingredients in the recipe. So here there's context and convenience, and then I can hit one button and it all goes into the basket, and I can quickly buy it. lot of commerce organizations, one of their prime objectives is to increase the basket size because they pay for every delivery. So if the basket's too small, they make less money. So it's a big objective for them is to increase basket size. So here they've turned it around from the customer point of view. We want to provide, you know, context and convenience, and that translates into value for me as a customer. And so those are two good examples of this sort of first key to success about, you know, rethinking the customer experience. A quick call to action. One of the organizations that we had the opportunity to work with regard to customer experience is Nutricia, and we have a case story about that on the Sitecore.net website. So number 2 here, the Context Marketing Foundation. So this is more getting a bit more into the world of Sitecore. So this idea, so generally one of the things we do in SBOSS is that we develop best practices very often in the form of like kind of methodology, process. It could be like, you know, 10 tips for personalization, or it could be something like a sort of an overall framework. But basically, when we talk about the foundation, there's a process. So starting from the customer point of view, thinking about, you know, what are the needs, concerns, the journey of the customer. Then aligning the stakeholders who could work on a context marketing project. Starting with, you know, executive mandate. So the organization truly, at some level, is committed to embrace this idea of being, you know, having the customer, working with customer experience as a strategic driver, and increasing knowledge of the stakeholders who would participate in such a project. Thereafter, process. So we have some different suggestions on processes at the project level and at the sort of like business case level that we work with. One of the new processes or sub-process that we've developed is a process working with personalization, the personalization planning tool, which is a process, and that's something that I'll talk a little bit about more. We're soon going to be sharing this through different ways, ebooks, YouTube, and so forth. But process is important. And then, of course, there's the Context Marketing Foundation. And this is about Sitecore technology. So if you want to leverage any technology, you need to make sure that things are set up optimally, configured, and running as expected. So that you can, you know, not only measure the quality of customer experiences, but you're also sort of gathering your analytics as you want to, and so forth. So this idea of the Context Marketing Foundation is what I want to just talk a little bit about. So when it comes to Sitecore context marketing and thinking about like the technology setup, of course, Sitecore is not the only technology in the marketing stack. And, you know, we're the first ones to acknowledge that. And we actually are talking more and more about that in terms of best practices. You know, what is Sitecore's role in the context marketing stack? In fact, we have a webinar at this moment. Two of my colleagues are doing a webinar on this subject. And so just to make it crystal clear, which I think is always important. So those partners who work with Sitecore, as Sitecore is more and more interested in motivating partners to, you know, provide, deliver context marketing solutions, you know, where's the bar? What's the definition? So these are the different technologies that should be, set up, configured, and used in a context marketing solution in order to call it a context marketing solution. Might sound a little bit obvious, but sometimes because there's so many tools available, there's a possibility that things are misunderstood. But of course, XDB must be present in order to basically collect the data that enables you to optimize experiences and use the different capabilities here. So this one I think is important. I could talk a little bit more about some of these things, and I'll do that in a little bit. But this is I think, what I also find to be important with regard to these keys to success, just understanding what should be implemented. Another question that comes up often is this idea of, why should we use Sitecore goals when we have Google Analytics or another analytics package? And of course, I've had the opportunity, worked in Sitecore for 5.5 years, and I have a long history working with digital marketing and so forth. So what I've come to realize and understand more clearly working on projects is that Sitecore goals are about measuring individual customer experiences. We should almost call them CX goals. It's how individuals and are willing to interact, they're willing to take action in a given experience because they want to get the value and share the data. So you want to measure that on the individual experiences. Of course, you can take that data and you can aggregate it, and it looks like other analytics, metrics. But there's no replacement for the idea of measuring individual customer experiences so that you can relate it back to an anonymous and eventually a named individual. That's not something that you do with aggregated analytics. So there must be goals that measure engagement value in a Sitecore solution. And I talked before initially about this idea of the evolution of engagement, this idea of passive engagement and active engagement. And and I think this is also one that I find to be effective in generating this awareness about why goals and engagement value. Passive, the idea of, what is engagement? There's no universal definition for engagement. So Sitecore is basically saying if a visitor interacts and shares data, then that's engagement. That's our definition of engagement. So we simply want to measure that. And that's what goals are enabling you to do. Goals with engagement value are enabling you to do. So that you can then attribute what happened on a visit and understand the value of what contributed to the visit. So the page, when I earned value on a visit, the pages that I viewed earn the value of the visit, etc. The channel earns the value, the campaign earns the value, etc. It's pretty intuitive once you start working with it. Rather than this sort of like, why should I have this to begin with? Which is what we typically do as humans. We resist change. We don't understand it, so we don't want to do it. Then, for those of you who are into the hands-on, like I am, this is something, the more I work with Sitecore, I think the more I believe it's important to understand, what are the different, I call them, in another slide, I'm calling like, the hooks. But this idea of, you want to listen digitally and engage. So you need ways to listen. And these are different ways to listen to interactions, from goals, engagement value, page events, outcomes, channels, and so forth. This is what ends up being generated when visits occur. And it's important to understand these. And it's important to understand the options that are available. So, for example, page events are, I think, really, really significant and important to use. Because there's some interactions that you don't want to measure as a goal, but you still want to measure it and count it, and you want to use it as a trigger. So rather than making goals with zero value, if anyone has been there, then use page events. And page events are also available in the key behavior cache. So you can use them for historical data. When goals are triggered, you can actually store data with the goal, and there's personalization rules that say that if the goal and the data, then that's the condition for a personalization rule. So storing data on when goals are triggered is also one of these very, very useful tactics and things to do, as well with outcomes. There's some really great cases I had the opportunity to work with where, in the case of a cinema operator, where visitors can come onto a website, look at a lot of cinemas, they can look at a lot of films, they can eventually choose a cinema, a date, the seating, maybe some optional stuff, and they don't have, and the transaction is completed. So this organization, they don't have integration to the transaction data, but what they're doing is they're storing all that information in the outcome, and the content gets updated. So you don't necessarily need to have an integration to back-end data. You can collect the data that you need for customer experience optimization when outcomes occur, when page events occur, and when goals occur, etc. So hopefully we'll be able to share more and more about that. So that's also one of my good pieces of advice. And finally, here on my second key to success is this idea of doing a scan check. So I do get the opportunity to work with a variety of customer projects. I get login access, I open up the box and I see, okay, like is the experience profile collecting data? Is the channel attribution, as we think it should be, like organic visits versus other referral? Do things look, like they're being collected accurately? There's a range of, so I developed this scan check. So you want to basically log in, admin access, look through analytics, look through experience profile, etc. This checklist, it doesn't tell you what to do if you don't see something there, but it's a really handy tool to just do, like a walkthrough, take 1-2 hours, everything from analytics to personalization being set up and so forth. So if anyone is interested in this tool or this little asset, you can send me either send me an email or send me a message on Twitter, whatever you want. Number 3, the idea of capturing data via, by meaningful customer experience interactions. So I've talked about customer experience interactions, and this idea that this idea of listening digitally, capturing responses, using those responses, in the next page view, the next, swipe of the phone. One of the projects I'm working on, there's a notification concept on the website that you can actually push down. So, and the customer and partner, they're sort of, it's a page event when the thing is put up and when it's swatted down. So you want to be able to listen digitally at a fairly granular level and use that to create better experiences. So I'm going to give a few examples, but before I do that, I want to just introduce this idea. Something that occurred to me recently that that marketers and particularly that's who we're often dealing with. There are these notions of traditional segmentation where a segment is kind of determined in advance, like the gender, the geography, the GYP, if it's like a state or a zip code or so forth. And that's how a lot of marketing works. We're going to do segmentation of our data, and then we're going to target people. And a lot of it, the easy ways to do it is like outbound email, outbound posts. Inbound is where it gets more interesting, of course. But nevertheless, there's this idea of traditional segmentation where, because of you're a certain gender or because you took one action, you bought the TV last month, so this month we're going to try to sell you the next thing. So in context marketing is more about dynamic segmentation. It's more about what you're doing, what you're actually doing, and what you have done, fairly recently, historically, and currently. And this idea that you want to basically, set up in Sitecore, working with rules, personalization, and so forth, is a way that you are actually working with segmentation in a more dynamic fashion. So this is a subject I'm going to be spending more time going into because I think it begins to make sense for those who are working with traditional marketing. But I thought about this idea of capturing data through meaningful interactions, and I brought a couple of examples of projects that I'm working with and have worked on. So one of them is a network of banks, where the banks sell insurance. So in certain countries, banks sell insurance directly, and you can buy it online. And this is a case where they sell these fairly commodity products, travel insurance. So they created this tool in order to provide convenience and capture data, and use that data to be more relevant as in the current visit and in subsequent visits, potentially in other channels. So there's a little online tool. What's the value of the stuff in your suitcase? Here's a little calculator that lets you understand, based on the consumer electronics you might have, and of your children as well, the clothing that you might have, etc. If you have gear like skis or golf clubs and so forth, should I get the insurance? Well, nah. I'm never going to lose it, but it's actually might be worth more than you think, and could therefore be a good idea. So this little interactive tool about what's the value of the suitcase. Practice is to capture the data, store it in the experience profile, so that you can use that for inbound dynamic segmentation as well as sort of outbound segmentation through other channels. So that's one example. Another example is our famous case of Nutricia, where they want to provide, basically they want to provide a lot of utility information and value from the customer's point of view based on the situations that they might be in, so that the overall effect is that the potential customers just find this to be a valuable resource. So there's one of the great examples is like the sliders. So they accommodate 4 different segments. As a visitor, you can go in and slide, if you have a child who's 16 months, and the content changes. So it's immediate convenience because I get the information I'm looking for. Every time the visitor does this, they trigger a goal. You can store the data in the goal, and then you can use personalization to communicate, in a more relevant way. Sliders like this are just gold when it comes to context marketing, context and value, as well as content. Content is about capturing data, and there's been some great presentations about cognitive learning and content, and I just think it's the idea, the traditional notion of let's write some blog posts or let's write some articles on different subjects. It should all be structured, and it should all be with the idea of collecting data, segmenting visitors, and so forth. And I think this is a really great example what they're doing on the Nutritia for You website. Another example is organization, and I need to speed it up a little bit. It's organization Gardena. So Gardena sells gardening equipment like shovels and rakes and so forth, as well as lawn mowers and other kind of powered tools and equipment. So this idea of capturing, providing value and capturing data in the customer experience. So you can plan your garden. They sell also irrigation hoses and computerized watering systems, electric robotic mowers and so forth. So you can plan your garden. You can choose, for example, get inspiration. Is it a small, medium, large? Okay, there's a little segmentation going on there. And so they're providing convenience and along the way capturing the data. And then in a Sitecore context, you're able to use that for intelligence, and you use it for creating better experiences. So this is the future. You need to, as I said earlier, you need to provide an experience if you want to leverage customer experience as a strategic driver. They have a lot of content about products and features and so forth, and the difference between this robotic mower and that robotic mower. But that's not, if you're going to basically present yourself as a product company, then you're going to compete as a product company. You're going to end up competing on prices and features, and no organization really should be doing that. So thinking about this idea of capturing these interactions, I showed this slide before. And there's some good tips with regard to using this. One of the personalization rules is about that you can use the historic data. If you go into the personalization rules editor and you type the word, it filters the rules when you go in and type the word pass or type the word elapsed, and it will show you the rules that are out of the box that let you leverage the data that occurred in previous visits. So in the last X number of days, in the last X number of visits. So you can use this rule for goals, for page events, for outcomes, for campaigns, and for channels. And these are the real good tools that are out of the box in the personalization editor. When I start up on projects, I'm often looking for some really simple ways to deploy some personalization scenarios so I can teach by showing some examples as quickly as possible. One example could be something like this. So the most important goal on the Gardena website, because they sell through a two-tier distribution, is the goal of where to buy the certain product, the dealer lookup. It could be a goal, and I can have a rule that says something like, if the visitor has used the Find store and ever or whatever in the past 60 days, 90 days, whatever you want, and they look for a certain product or product category. Now I know that, so if they come back and they come to the home page, or they come to the category page, or they come to a product page, or they come to this page, the find again. So now we can just provide some more context, more convenience to let them get to where they want to go, more quickly, more easily. And this is what really gets results. So it's simple uses of these out-of-the-box capabilities. The next one, I'm down to about 5 minutes, I realize. So learn by doing. There's some good things I want to say here. One is keep it simple, goals, start with a couple of goals, maybe personalizing inbound visits from personalization, A/B testing. I'll talk more about that. Process. We share this sort of suggestion for what a process could be for a context marketing project with different phases. About, in the first phase, it's about awareness, it's about commitment. The second phase, it is about scoping. Establish a context marketing project where you are not too ambitious so that you can actually complete it in a reasonable amount of time. Implementation, the foundation that I talked about before, establishing an engagement value scale, establishing, understanding the goals, potentially, using page events. I mean, it's so easy to work with page events, and so forth. And then, working with the tools. The more and more customer projects that I'm working with are using 8.2 and the Path Analyzer, for example. There's really this opportunity for what I call the aha moments of learning by doing. So there's nothing better than actually starting and trying things in parallel with having a broader understanding amongst the group of stakeholders, which in other words, it's like try things, learn by doing. One simple example that I did recently, an organization that has like a lot of websites, you can register as a user, as a visitor, and create a profile and mark your preferences so that you can have a better experience when you use the website. So one of their big calls to action is to register. So we have a situation where on the home page there's a kind of a generic statement about the brand. It's a very brand centric, so it's not about the customer, it's about them. We're award winning. It's like, congratulations. But it should be more about the customer. So we simply, on the page where the registration form sits, we created a page event called registration form viewed. There's also a goal when the registration is completed. So we know if you view and if you complete, or if you view and don't complete. So there's a rule that says if you viewed it and you haven't completed it and you're back on the home page, it's about you. Register and find your dream job. It takes 5 minutes left, got it? It takes a few minutes to implement this. You can set the personalization up very simply because you're reusing a component, changing the text. And now you have an example to show stakeholders rather than spending a lot of time explaining what personalization is. You can show it very easily. So highly recommend this. Testing the same. Really easy to set up a test. This is testing 2 headlines. Out of the box, you understand what's the next page that was visited for those who were exposed to the test. So it's like a click-through result for an A/B test. So that's also one of the easy ones. Call to action on the, we've created a lot of videos. We're really getting into the video business in SBOSS. We have a series here that I'm showing here, but you can find more and more videos from SBOSS on YouTube. It's one of our big pushes. The last one here, and this will go quick. The business case for growing customer experience maturity. I know we've got some ebooks about this, so I'm going to talk about them, but what the real important ones, I think, are defining a project scope that's not too complex and takes too long time to execute. And it really comes down to context marketing scenarios. Defining 10, 15 scenarios where personalization is used, targeting different segments, defining the pages, the components, the rules. I talked about a personalization planner exercise that we've produced, and we'll be sharing that more and more. But these are the sort of, in reality, some of the real focus areas and priorities, I believe. And then we have some assets. We have an ebook where that process I showed before, we have a kind of a recipe step by step in an ebook format where you can actually type in, what your goals might be, etc. So it's a nice tool to sort of gain early awareness with stakeholders, maybe use it for like a small simulated project in a 2-hour workshop. We also have in this ebook an ROI calculator that you can type in and understand if the value of the conversion is X, and I use personalization to improve the uplift. What's the return on investment? So that's another sort of actionable. Finally, my last slide, where we have 3 minutes left. This is good because usually I go over. Is this one, and this is the second SUGCON I've been to, and I know that even Symposium is fairly developer active, you could say. And I really see this, collaboration as a key to success between those of you who, really understand the technical side of things, and that the context marketer who more and more is both, a technical person and a sort of like a right brain, left brain person. So it's not about versus, but it's working together. So isn't that nice? So that's my final slide. There's probably time for one or two questions. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Anyone with questions?
Yes.
Actually, we do have a lot of clients that love Sitecore when they love the opportunities of the experience, of the customer experience. However, there are always barriers in using all the opportunities that are there. Are there, from your experience, do you know, or what do you think are the barriers or maybe challenges in getting started with this customer experience?
Yeah, I think that what I've learned is there's different scenarios. In some cases, there's a lot of commitment, and there's an eagerness to learn. In other cases, it's a little bit like, maybe defensive because of afraid of the unknown. So I would recommend create one goal, create one personalization scenario, document it because you want to teach and the sort of walk through, and then implement it like the one I showed with the abandonment of the form with a page event, and try to show this. And then if possible, just create a test. So when you set up a personalization scenario, you can also, as an option, you say you want to make it into a test. So then you can show conversions, you can show engagement value in this test details dialogue. So it's a way of actually trying to raise the awareness by having an example. Because very often we sort of like start off with too much of slideware and too much of like stakeholder, like this is what's possible. And there's confusion with like, how's profiling, profile cards, profile patterns, what is this? So rather just show when it's appropriate. So I think we're there.
More questions?
Great, but thanks so much, and look forward to the rest of SUGCON. Thanks so much. Great.